Everyone, to our email marketing team meeting for this week, September 14th. We have a great agenda planned for you for today. Rob Harrell and I are going to be taking you through some ideas and some examples of what different teams have done. And so I think I'm going to turn it over to Rob.
Hello, everybody. As Carla said, we're going to walk through a few different examples. I'm going to start with some of the things that we've been doing here in Michigan. And I'm going to let Carla handle the slides for me on this as I'm going through. But first and foremost about the event, we'll be able to, we want to get your questions. And want to impart as much information as we can, but we want you also to be able to share some of your learning experiences so far. So ask those questions in the chat, and then we'll try to get to them as we go. So moving to the next slide. As I mentioned, I'm the state director for Michigan, and so we have a few of the Michigan team members on the call tonight, but I'm going to run through some of the highlights for you guys of what we've been working on for the last couple of weeks. We've been trying to leverage current events to drive email engagement. Specifically, we had some open rates that we were hoping to drive up to get a little bit higher is one of our key KPIs that we were focused on in the last couple of weeks. And we actually had a lot of current events that played into this strategy. So over the last 2 weeks, we've sent out 10 different emails that were themed to around current events. And those events, as you'll see, could have been on the national level or because all politics are local, there were a lot of little events that were tied to our specific candidates that we tried to leverage when we were mentioning or crafting our subject lines. And as you guys probably know, and testing it varies from one campaign to the other, but as a general rule, short and snappy, catchy subject lines tend to work really well, and that's what we focused on with the team here. And we did pretty well. We had, as I mentioned, we had exactly 10 different emails that we sent out in the last 2 weeks, and we've raised over $7,500 so far with 142 individual donations. And while our focus was primarily around open rate, that was the objective of this exercise. We were sending out other emails at the same time as well. But the donation count is important as well, because a lot of these were what we were what we were using as sort of flash emails. The events happened, they came, they weren't necessarily planned. As an example, like President Trump visited Michigan. Vice President Biden was also in Michigan. We had the Vice President Pence was in Michigan as well. And that sort of lays into what Governor Whitmer has said, is that the road to the White House goes right through the state of Michigan. So we've been trying to use those national events as well as the local events to attract small donations by doing like flash emails and capturing those contributors who are motivated by an action in that moment to donate. So we had two that I'm highlighting here, but I'll go through all of the subject lines that we use. Dan O'Neill is a candidate who is running in the 104th in Michigan in a very traditionally, I don't even want to call it a purple district. It has been almost exclusively red. But in 2018, he ran for the first time and lost by just over 300 votes. And he's a super engaging candidate, and he's in a tough district. And so we wanted to leverage his supporters. He has an email list of about 2,500 people. And we wanted to leverage those by calling attention to the fact that his opponent was getting support at the national level. Mike Pence actually was in town to support his opponent. So we called that out in an email, and you can see the subject line was short and sweet. Mike Pence is in town today. And we also, one other
Okay, it's okay.
One other trick that we like to include in there is the preview text as well. And Dan's TFC team has learned this over, probably sending out about 10 to 11 emails now already. And so that's where, again, we called out the fact that this was to help his opponent. We had an open rate on this one that averaged almost 35%. And raised $2,600. So it had, and it was, the key there is, again, we were just asking on this particular email, and we don't do this on all of them, but we just had hey, can you chip in $10 to help us out? So we had a lot, it generated 56 different donations. So it really, it really was impactful. They weren't high dollar donors, but we got a lot of his list engaged in this particular email. The other one that I called out, I'm again leveraging current events. This one we could schedule a little bit better because we did it around Labor Day. And we had a candidate, Cheryl Kennedy, who is an incumbent, a little bit smaller list than Dan, but we wanted to focus on the fact that she had gotten a lot of great union endorsements. And I'm sure many of you, even outside of Michigan, know that Michigan's a very big union state. And that went to Trump in 2016 by less than 11,000 votes. So engaging the workforce in Michigan is a huge topic for all of our candidates. And Cheryl wanted to make mention of not only her endorsements, but celebrate the fact that she has so many union workers in her district. So we did that. We used emojis, which are also sometimes effective, and was very effective on this one. And so we called out her endorsements by saying, celebrating our workers this Labor Day, and it had an open rate of over 42%. So that did really well as well, leveraging a particular current event. And if we go to the next slide, and I know there's some questions in the chat, so I'll stop talking in a minute, but I wanted to show you some of these other topical subject lines that perform very well in Michigan. And you can see there's a common theme around many of them, and that is national figures. And obviously, Joe Biden, Mike Pence, and unfortunately Donald Trump are household names. So when you can include those particular items in an email, it tends to drive up that open rate. Of course, open rate isn't the only metric that we're interested in. You want to have strong click-through rates, and hopefully, in all of these cases, they were fundraising emails. So donations are important as well. And I'm happy to say that almost without exception, all of the emails that we sent out in this little sort of topical subject line test throughout Michigan had strong metrics in all three of those key areas. So again, they don't have to necessarily, perhaps Joe Biden isn't visiting Texas this month, although I'm sure he probably will. So like, what else can you use to potentially get engaging subject lines that people will open? We had Representative Padma Kuppa in Michigan as well, is a strong proponent of empowering women. So we did an email for celebrating Women's Equality Day, which was August 26th, and it had her highest open rate of any of the emails we sent out, with well over 30%. That last subject line got cut off a little bit. I apologize for that. But we also taking it even more local than that, we have a candidate, Bill Saxon, in Michigan as well, who has 2 twin girls, and a lot of his supporters know, or he has twins, a girl and a boy, and a lot of his supporters know this because it's in a lot of his campaign literature. So they had their 4th birthday a couple weeks ago, and we used that as an opportunity to send out an email and let his constituents, let his donors have an opportunity to wish the twins a happy birthday. And that one had an open rate also close to 35%. So you can see, you can get creative with these, have a little fun with them, hopefully, and then in the process, raise some money as well. So I'll stop there. Carla, did we have any questions?
We had a couple of questions that were answered, and then one just says, how responsive is the campaign to be able to do these kinds of current events? For example, Mike Pence is in town.
They loved it. Mike Pence was actually the first one we did. That's where we kind of had, we had the idea to focus around some current events. And that was the first one we did. It worked. It was, hugely successful. We turned the email around. We found out Mike Pence was coming the day before. We did a quick email, got campaign approval that same night, and we sent it out the morning. So people were opening it as the current vice president, hopefully soon to be former vice president, landed in the district. And like I said, it not only had high open rates, but it got quite a number of donations as well.
Great, thanks. And I would just add one more question for you, Rob. Was this news that you got from the campaign, or was this news that came in through you or through a volunteer?
Well, now it's going to sound, now you set me up, you're going to make me sound sort of narcissistic, but it was actually, I was looking for ways that we could sort of engage the whole Michigan team, so that we're talking from team to team. And these, it really came from the news of the day, where Governor Whitmer has talked a lot about the national attention on Michigan this year. And I don't know if some of you guys know this, but she's also the co-chair of the Biden national campaign. So she talks a lot about the visitors that are coming into the state, and she gets a lot of national attention. So it was some news headlines that I happened to see and then mentioned to the other teams. And luckily, Michigan has a lot of strong email teams that took that information and ran with it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that, Rob. I think we're kind of going to stick a little bit along the lines of the good subject lines here. I have asked the Kaiser Enneking team from Florida House District 21 to come on. They have been working as a team with Kaiser since June, and have done a lot of work with her in doing a lot of A/B testing. So they've completed 12 different A/B tests across the weeks, and had some very interesting findings. And so I'd actually like to turn it over to Linda and Christine from Kaiser's team to talk a little bit about what they've done. And I can move these slides along for you.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Okay, great. So I'm going to give you a little background about myself first. My name is Linda. I'm based in Queens, New York, and this is actually my first campaign with Tech for Campaigns and political campaigns in general. So I wanted to kind of explain that I think context is key. I'll give you the kind of the big picture of what my thinking was when I entered the strategy that we ultimately ended up deciding upon. And then you guys can decide for yourselves whether or not these tests are appropriate for your candidate. So my background is in fundraising, actually. Before I was doing marketing for a email marketing software company, I was actually a nonprofit fundraiser for a charter school network here in New York City. So some of the assumptions that I made going into this are going to be probably a little different from the assumptions maybe you've made coming from the background that you've come from. I also had the benefit of, Kaiser having run in 2018. So we had her 2018 emails and her statistics from there to kind of function as a baseline. So I wanted to give some quick tips about the specific tests that we decided to conduct that might be useful for you. The tests that we did end up choosing to conduct are based off of our situation, which is we're running on NGP van 7, which means that we have severe limitations about the kind of information, the data that we can collect, as well as like just basic difficulties with formatting emails, et cetera. I basically code everything in HTML for every single one of these emails. We don't have MailChimp, we don't have any of those drag and drop functions. So we really focused on content and quality of content and making sure that we were really putting a priority on the story. But that having been said, some quick tips that I think would be helpful for, I think, everybody here are just some things that I know from my fundraising background, which is that people like to be encouraged with specific donation amounts. And the way that I look at it is that the donation amounts that I suggest will be based on the audience that I'm sending to. So if it's just a regular kind of email where it's not necessarily based on how high engaged they are or how much they've given in the past, I'm going to give them a list of donation amounts that are based on their average donation that we've just gotten in general for the campaign. And for us, it's pretty high. It's an average of $82. So if you can see in the image below, you'll see that we started with a suggested donation amount of $55, $95, and $150. So and just 150. So you might be wondering why I put those specific donation amounts in. Generally speaking, when I was doing donations, and fundraising in nonprofits, it was helpful if you're going to provide a list of suggested donation amounts to break the pattern a little bit, to kind of just make people focus a little bit more on the specific donation amounts. And so, for example, if you were thinking of suggesting 20, 75, or 150, I would actually push to make it a little bit even more odd. So you could do something like 10, 25, or 49, which kind of, I think it helps for us at least. You don't have to do it all the time, but it actually did make a difference for us. And so as you can see, I also gave an extra example for our end of the month campaign. We send an end of the month email as well as an end of the month kicker. And in those emails, I concentrate and I focus on raising our participation rate. So when I say participation rates, I'm trying to say I want to get more number of individual donors instead of focusing on a higher donation amount. And that's been working for us as well. Next slide, please. The next kind of tip that I'm going to give is about subject line tests, which I will admit that my philosophy has definitely, it's a little bit different from what TFC has recommended. TFC recommends a word count that is quite short, about maybe like 3 to 5 words. I tend to go a little longer, and I do absolutely use the preview text function. So the way that I approach my subject lines is I always use full sentences as best as I can, and I make sure that the subject line is directly relevant to the content that is within the email. So I actually do not go for clickbaity emails. I do not go for the emails that are just that you might think, get people to drive urgency. To the best of my ability, I really try to be transparent and clear about what information the person's going to be getting. And then also, in kind of like a broad view context, the way that I've been strategizing is I do a 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 ratio between non-fundraising related emails with fundraising emails, so that people actually feel like they're getting utility in opening and reading this content. And when I say non-fundraising related emails, I mean things like, this is how you cast a ballot, this is how you get your ballot, this is the status of the pandemic and COVID right now, these are the best practices about how you should wear your mask. That's what I mean. So that is definitely a best practice. I think TFC also recommends that you don't just send fundraising emails. So going more specifically about the tests that we did run, I tested, for example, kind of a request versus an offer. So the request is to phone back virtually for Kaiser Enneking versus we'll train you to phone back for Kaiser. It's a really subtle difference, in tone, but I was curious about what the mindset would be from the audience, and we realized that that worked. News versus curiosity, being very factual in our subject lines, again, kind of like what I was saying before, being very upfront about what's in the content of the email has also worked for us. And you know, not doing the hashtag, being informative, you know, being also kind of motivational in the subject lines. Those have always helped us. That's helped us. And all of this kind of, I think, goes back to the same thing that I was saying earlier, which is that, you know, we really try to strive for worthwhile, really engaging content versus just getting open rates up, versus just getting people to look at the email. We really try to make it quality content. And so I'll go to the next slide, please. Okay, so this is just really general. As I said before, we are NGP Band 7, which means that there are severe limitations with what I felt I could do in terms of coding. So I use the TFC recommended email template. It is super, super simple. All it is the logo at the top and the content. And when it came to testing the formatting, I just wanted to see if I could play with the colors. Blue was something that worked well with us, as you can see in the little call out box there. You can see, will you help me finish the finish line? That's actually also a clickable link. It goes to the donate button. And yes, we do put photos in. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. But again, the way that we use photos, just to begin with, is we only add photos if it adds a value, if that photo actually adds a value to the content. So we don't put it in the majority of our emails. We only put photos in for emails such as, you know, when we sent a Happy Labor Day card that actually got one of the highest open rates because it looked like a really personal card that somebody would send from their personal email. And I think that's why that worked for that email. But again, we don't use it for all of them. Part of that's because we're an NGP fan, and part of that's also because I don't have access personally, and my team doesn't have access personally to those other testing sites such as Litmus and those other things that maybe you guys have access to. In terms of call to action, we've done a little playing with that as well. One thing that I've seen other candidates do, not in TFC specifically, but just the candidates that I have in my personal emails, they do kind of add a line that says, you know, if you have a payment information saved with that blue, your donation will go through immediately. The benefit of doing that is that if people are kind of not used to donating politically, this line almost helps them kind of train their mind into potentially being a more frequent donor. So maybe that, I think that's why that works. Another test that we did was on the text that you put within the donate button. So you can see part of it in the first image that is on this slide. TFC recommended at some point that you be very specific with what you want them to do. So you'll say maybe donate to volunteer, donate to fund our text campaign, and you'll have that text within a single button. We tested that out. The results weren't like super, you know, in your face, you know, the simple donate button works better, but in that particular test that we did, the simple donate button worked better. So we just stick with simple donate. And again, kind of like what we're saying about images, we did test endorsement logos, and that kind of follows with our philosophy of, you know, adding images when it's relevant, when it's useful, when it actually adds something to the content. And so endorsement logos also is consistent with that finding. So this slide, I believe we're going to have my teammate Christine, who is our data analyst, present on this slide.
Hey everybody, so I'm the data analyst for the Kaiser Enneking campaign. A little bit about myself, I'm 3 hours ahead of Linda, so I sit on the West Coast. During the day, I basically spend my time in Salesforce, so I'm very data driven to begin with. And my general background prior to this was general marketing. I did proposal management, some email marketing. So what's been really interesting for me as another first-time political campaign volunteer has been the segmentation that we've been doing. So when we first started in June, we just were sending to the general list, and Kaiser's general list was probably about 4,000 to 4,500 or so people. As we've become more familiar with her and the campaign and things that might be better to send to her constituents than others, that we've started to do a little bit more segmentation. So we've got, for the Act Blue donors, we've got 2 different email series that we drop them into. So we've got one where they're donating directly to the campaign, where more than 50% of the people that we've sent those emails to have opened it. And then we have a separate series for people that are donating mostly to just general state campaigns. So those have been performing pretty decently, I think. Where we've seen a lot more action, particularly on the open rates here, are some of the recent endorsement emails that we've done, where we've looked at who's opened an email, a similar email in the past. So we did one recently in Florida. There's a lot of talk about freshwater springs in general, I think in the entire state, but we segmented that email based on who had opened an email that we sent about Sierra Club endorsement previously. And so we had a 50% open rate on that. Our average open rate usually is probably like 15 to 20-ish%, I'm gonna say. And then recently we sent a couple of endorsement emails, one about college Democrats, because for Kaiser, the University of Florida sits almost squarely in the middle of her district. And so we have a lot of emails in there that are associated with the university somehow. She also works at the university. So for our college Democrats, and we had a key LGBTQ plus endorsement that we targeted those. So again, we saw a much higher open rate compared to our endorsement emails that got sent to the entire list. And our average donation actually was about a third higher when we segmented them. So we're still, figuring out how to best segment things. Again, in NGP 7, it's challenging, to say the least, to build the segments. So I guess we've done pretty well, considering. The question about how large were the segmented lists we're sending to, I'm gonna say it ranges probably anywhere from a couple of hundred to several hundred. So yeah, we're working on one now. I think about schools opening and one Linda's going to be testing a subject line about that, about college specifically versus general school opening. And that email is going to get sent only to the people on the list that are located within her district.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to present. I'm sure that people have questions aside from the size of the list. What I would love to do is move on to our next presenter, who is Feng, who is working on 2 campaigns right now, and let him share, and then open it up for Q&A and further discussion once Feng is done. So stay here, Christine and Linda, don't go anywhere. We'll come back to you in a couple minutes. Hang on. So as I said, another volunteer is presenting tonight. Feng Hong is working on both Clint Barris in Florida and Selena Montoya in Texas. And he's been able to leverage one particular strategy across both campaigns quite successfully and several times in a row. So I am going to let him take over from there.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you. By the way, Carl, I think you're on the softer side. Something happened to your audio in the middle. That's for me. Maybe somebody else can confirm that Carla's volume kind of dropped somewhere.
I will try to be louder.
Cool. So for a little bit of background, since Linda and Christine were giving you guys their backgrounds, I'm in New Jersey, and I am a tech software product marketer by trade. And so that's how I'm approaching this when it comes to messaging and email marketing. I feel like a lot of you guys are from the tech, well, hence the name Tech for Campaigns. You guys are from the tech world as well. So the two campaigns that Carla was talking about and that I'm working on for email marketing are Clint Barris for Florida House District 120, as well as Selena Montoya in Texas, House District 121. And what she said was, yeah, I'd like to reiterate, this is call it keep it in the family, or emails from family, specifically fundraising emails that come from family members. In this case for Clint, it was his wife, Sunshine. I forget her actual name, but that's her nickname. And what a perfect name for a Florida state representative. But anyway, it's an email from, so we've done this twice with Sunshine. Once in the beginning of our campaign, call it around end of June, actually. It was an end of month deadline kicker. And for Cindy, his sister, not Cindy Barris, Cindy Saylor, she, I think, has taken on a different last name. But anyway, his sister, and this was, call it middle of August. So not an end of month deadline email and not a kicker either. But either way, these are both emails that come from family members. And for his wife, Sunshine, I wanted to give you some details as to, and this is, call it a test or an analysis looking at optimizing the open rate. So see if you want to incorporate this into sort of increasing your open rates for your campaigns. But I wanted to give you some details as to some variables that may have caused this to have a higher open rate than average. So for the email from the wife, it was from Sunshine, no last name, it was from Sunshine. And the subject line was "Forward, we need you." And like I said, it was a kicker to an end of month email for the end of August. And so that's the email to the right side. And then for the sister email from Cindy, it was simply from Cindy, no last name. And the subject line was "Forward, let's do this." And so the open rates, in fact, for Cindy on the left side, it was 44%. So the highest open rate and actually the highest opens in terms of the absolute number too for our entire campaign. So the open rates for the 3 forward emails, so that's 2 from Sunshine and 1 from Cindy, it's an average of 36% versus 16%. And that 16% average is excluding these 3 emails, as well as excluding the reactivation ones, which you would naturally have lower open rates. So we excluded that one as well in order to do a comparison. So yeah, take a look at, incorporating not just the family member, but maybe some of these elements of the from, as well as the subject line. If you can go to the next slide for Selena Montoya. So for Selena, we had an email from Luke, and again, a forward, a kicker. So for Selena, we had 2 different subject lines that we wanted to test. One was a forward, "Thank you for your kind words." That's in the context of a post-survey email that we sent to Selena's readership. So they filled out a survey, and then we said, "Thank you for your kind words," as in thank you for your kind words that you said in the survey. And so this was a forward from Luke about that survey. So we tried to test out the forward as opposed to "my wife, a representative who listens." So that's 2 different subject lines. And the email is to the right over here. In fact, at the bottom it says, "Give her a call at this phone number." And so that was very purposeful. Selena said she never got any phone calls from this email. But it's something that she strives to offer for people. But anyway, the open rates were 22% for the one that says, "My wife, a representative who listens," and 33% for forward, "Thank you for your kind words," versus the 17% average if you exclude these emails as well as the reactivation ones. And one other note is that sometimes Gmail treats forwards with the, the FWD colon. If you have it in conversation mode, whether it's in Gmail or Outlook, sometimes they'll truncate the forward out of it. So maybe the forward isn't the specific text that causes someone to open because they truncate that out. But either way, for some reason, the forward, thank you for your kind words, did better than my wife, a representative who listens. But either way, this performed better than average. So between this case, as well as the Clint Bears case, there's some proof points here for incorporating family members into your sends, especially for end of month deadline kickers, et cetera, for fundraising emails. Yeah, cool. That's it from me.
And Feng, we use this opportunity. Can you hear me? Okay.
It's still a little low, but I can hear you.
Okay. We use this opportunity also to kind of humanize the candidates with Clint in particular as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about the stories?
Yeah. If you go to the email before, the slide before. So we took this opportunity to tell personal stories. And like I said, I'm a tech product marketer. And so like the storytelling is an important element of it. So in either of the cases, actually in either of Selena's and Clint's cases, telling the story of, you see the wonderful picture of Clint in the football uniform. And so it's the two key things is like Clint being sort of that all-American sort of image, if you will. And then secondly, why he does what he does and why he's fighting for what he's fighting for. And so there's a nice story about how he embodies the American dream. So that was a story that we wanted to put in here. And for Selena, similarly, my wife, the representative who listens, I'm giving you her phone number. She does this crazy thing of really, being there for her constituents and being there for the people in her community. And so there's that personal story element to it. So those were certain things that we wanted to infuse in here. And Sunshine, the wife of Clint Bears, she also had different stories to tell about Clint. But either way, we're trying to do different things here. We will try to incorporate, so looking forward, we're trying to incorporate each of these family members a little bit more, but this time testing other things like short versus longer emails. Sometimes this is a great story, but maybe it's a little on the long side. We'll test a shorter version of a story as well to see if people read through it and click, donate. So that's what we're looking at looking forward.
Thank you so much, Feng, for sharing that. I think it's been really helpful for everyone to hear. So I wanted to open this up to questions. You can feel free to unmute yourselves and ask a question or share something that's worked for you in the past. If you do unmute and want to ask a question, just let us know what campaign you're working on and where you are. How about that? Any questions?
Hey, it's Sam Bronstein. I'm on the, and I know you all from the Florida campaign too, but for email, I work for Pennsylvania for Dana for PA 97. Thank you guys so much. This is great information. One question, as we get closer to obviously election day, we're all kind of trying to optimize our donations, but also not burn out and get the unsubscribes. So what have you all found to be the maximum cadence that you can send to like your engaged plus new audiences? When are you starting to see the unsubscribes get to what you think would be an unacceptable level? How many per week?
Well, I'll go ahead and share. And Feng, do you have something you wanted to comment with?
Well, for me, I don't have an exact answer to that, but the Selena Montoya campaign does want to test out a barrage of about 5 or 6 emails between like September 21st to the 24th. So I can tell you the extreme case of that and see how that goes after September 21st to 24th.
And so I guess the other thing I would add on that is if you do want to send multiple emails in a short amount of time, maybe looking at some of the different kinds of segmentation as we get closer and closer to the list, closer and closer to the election. I think burning the list a little bit is not going to be as big of a concern. because, you know, these are some, you know, we need the fundraising and we need people to, you know, kind of pay attention. Did anyone else have a thought or feeling about that? I don't want to put you on the spot, but Cora, I saw you are on. I know one of your campaigns sends a lot, like a higher volume of emails.
Hi, I'm eating soup, sorry. Yeah, so on Andrew Learned's campaign, we send about, well, between us and the campaign, we send about 5-6 emails a week. So TFC handles about 3 of those, and then the campaign does. I do think they're trained for it, so I think that they're very unique. As opposed to the other campaign I recently started about a month ago, Nina Yokman, also in Florida. Her audience was brand new, and you know, we kind of just started. So we've been slowly rolling into this, doing 2 emails a week, paying attention, because we have been seeing really great open rates, because I think people are like, we have a list of about 700 on that campaign, where folks are opening and they're clicking, but then we're also seeing just some, you know, unsubscribes also happening. So we're just kind of paying attention to both of those things. But so I don't know if that answers any questions, but on the Andrew campaign, where we send lots and lots of emails, I honestly think that group is very used to it. We have a very, you know, but we have segmented those audiences to, you know, the active, and then the like 60 and above, like kind of more like stale users, which helps. And so we rarely email that audience unless there's something really great, which I thought one of the examples of like personalization was really great here. Like Andrew did, he got engaged within the last month, sent it to his entire list of 18,000 people, and that actually re-engaged about, I feel like about 600 of those previous like stale audience folks. So yeah, I don't know, a little bit rambly. I don't know if that helps at all.
Thank you.
I've got 2 more things that might be tidbits that might help. One is that I mentioned that burst of emails, that barrage. You know, we're going to have a different sender right somewhere in the middle of that, and that's Julian Castro sort of endorsing Selena. So maybe and again with the family members, the from being different might help with that. The second thing I wanted to mention was, what was I going to mention actually? Oh, the one thing that we did also was to exclude people who did not open the fundraising series of emails. So it's almost as though they're kind of new to, let's say it's the 3rd fundraising email in a row, but if they had not opened the last 2 anyway, but they've opened ones prior to that, maybe, you know, this is kind of fresh-ish to them. So maybe limiting to that is a suggestion too.
Yeah, one thing I'll just jump in with is that we had this example, the example that he just gave of sending from different family members. Something that we found works is just varying from in general can be an effective strategy. So you can sort of have some that come from the campaign manager and then follow that up with some that come directly from the candidate. Or things like that. So I think the family member one is a particularly good one that works well, but also just varying in general can be a good strategy. Particularly to break up like those end of month kickers, or, you know, any sort of burst kind of thing like that.
Yeah, good idea. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions?
Hey, I had a question that came up on our check-in call today and wanted to ask the group about if there are any best practices around either increasing the number of recurring donations that you're getting from people, or trying to get recurring donors, sorry, to up their donation amount, or whether at this point is it too close to the election to consider that?
I mean, I can jump in a little bit. I know I have a team right now that's sort of looking at this, and they are planning to, they're basically sort of doing a segmentation of their donors and adjusting the ask based on it. Oh, I wonder if anyone from the team is actually on the call here. Let me check. I could speak to this. I don't think so, but if I'm missing you, speak up. But what they're doing is, so they're splitting it up, and so as a result, part of that donor list is the recurring group. So they're basically breaking out the recurring group and going to send them a message that's kind of upselling, trying to increase their recurring amount. I think, in most cases, that group is so small for most of our campaigns that, putting a lot of extra effort into targeting a very specific thing just to them. But I think if you're doing kind of like a message to your donors and just segmenting them, and you can customize a bit of your ask, targeting for them, an increased sell, I think you can. But I don't know that we have, I don't know if any other people from TFC have any experience with sort of, any sort of significant data backing up something there, because the numbers are just so small, it's hard to learn anything specific about that.
Hey, Chris, it's Jessica working on Tom Sherman's campaign. I wasn't sure which New Hampshire campaign you were looking for. My air purifier went on, so I couldn't hear you. I can speak a little bit to how we segmented, but I didn't know if we were the campaign you were mentioning.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Hi, guys. So I'm working on Tom Sherman's campaign. I'm the email marketing manager. And so we did a couple of different things in terms of segmentation. We looked at people in ranges, and so we tried to pick a middle of the range value for our donate button, and that was explicit to our call to action. So we had a total of 5 groups that went out via campaign. So we had prior donors were grouped into like donation buckets, and we had 4 of those. And we had also excluded anybody, I believe, who had made a donation within the last 30 days. We just wanted to kind of test the waters and see, like, not overhit these people, but I think we're going to start ramping up based on the behavior from other campaign emails I've been seeing. So they got a unique call to action button. Additionally, you can append, if you're using ActBlue, you can append your donation link with values. So for like people in the, I think it was like our 100 to 250 range, we asked them for like $150 or $200. I can't remember off the top of my head, but their buttons that they saw that they could select from when they landed on the ActBlue donation page were all of a higher range. So we didn't show them like a $5 donation button or a $15 donation button. We showed them buttons at higher donations. Obviously you can always input your own value, but the intention was, can we not only ask them for a higher amount of people who had previously donated within this range, but also show them other numbers around that and skew higher? I think our highest button had $750 on it to see if we could encourage a higher level donation. So however many buttons are defaulted, I think you pick 6 or 7 values. You can then go and do that uniquely to your link. So we did, and so like for people who had never made a donation, we asked them for $25, and we had a range from $5 up to I think like $100 or $150 landing on the page. So that was one of the things we started looking at for doing donation values and trying to give people not only an explicit amount to ask for, but give them a unique range. But again, really small audience sizes. I don't think we had an audience larger than like 100 people for each of our segments.
I have a question about that. Is that dynamic, what you're talking about in ActBlue? Or is that something that you have to change the page ahead?
You have to change your URL. So I made them unique to each email. Let me pull one up for you. And I found it, I was looking at like a Jamie Harrison campaign for button ideas. I was talking to our campaign manager. So if you take a look at this page, I will put it in the chat. And I can also share my screen, but you guys can then all have this. So as you can see, we've got a ref code, or we updated it with a ref code, and then it says amount equals 25. So that's the one that turns blue. And then it has a series of amounts in it. Let me share my screen real quick. I know we're at the end. Hopefully you guys can see my screen, but so if I change these amount values right here, so I can do, and I think you're supposed to put them in incremental order, so I can do 100, 125, 150, 175, 200, and I can even make the last one 500 and hit enter. It updates all these buttons and it'll stay unique. Obviously you want your amount Like that doesn't make sense, but maybe you want this one to say $100. And then it'll pick 100 and highlight it in blue. So we sent out a unique button, and you can append with ampersand amounts equals and put in your values for your different campaigns. So the idea was to encourage them to look if they were within a larger donation button. Let's give them buttons of things they might more likely contribute to. Because I think behavior is you're more likely to just pick a button value than to write something in. And so let's give them that.
I love this tip. That's great. And I just tested it with people who have cookie blockers, and you just get the default page, so it doesn't break anything.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, that was awesome. So I think if there aren't any other questions, I think we're coming up to the end of our hour. Any last questions? Okay. Well, as always, I so appreciate all of you volunteering your time and your effort and your experience. I know that you're making a huge difference for these campaigns, and thank you for spending some time with us tonight. Have a great week.
Thank you too, Carla.